this work on transformational leadership is Jennifer's work and her PhD and postdoc at Queen's that really have initiated this and have really made this work available to coaches for consumption and for help for the work with different organizations and sport organizations. So I'll leave it to Jen here to take over and describe a little bit more transformational leadership.
All right, thank you, Jean. So as Jean highlighted in that model, we're really trying to understand what effective interpersonal behaviors might look like. So we were really drawing upon this idea of transformational leadership, and really transformational leadership is focused on follower development. So in the case of sport, we're really focusing on athlete development, which we've conceptualized using the 4 C's. So competence, confidence, connection, and character. So really the idea of transformation is really focusing on the athletes, and that they are the ones who are transforming, and they are the ones who are acquiring and developing these outcomes. So we really found a lot of overlap between the idea of transformational leadership and a lot of the work that we had been doing in positive youth development, and that it was taking a strength-based approach to really building on followers' skills and attitudes so that they could develop these positive outcomes. And really drawing again from organizational psych, that it is designed to empower, inspire, and challenge their followers so that they can achieve these long-term outcomes. So let's go to the next slide. So when we talk about transformational leadership, you'll often hear the components of transformational leadership, which are conceptualized as the 4 I's. Oh,
sorry.
So the 4 I's, just very briefly, and we can certainly elaborate on these later on in the webinar, but the first one is idealized influence. So really this idea of practicing what you preach, and this is really how leaders gain trust and respect by acting as a positive role model and demonstrating their personally held beliefs. So it really is tied to the values of the coach and how they actually demonstrate those values through their behaviors. And again, really focusing on how we develop trust and respect with our athletes. The second component is inspirational motivation. So this is all about believing in your athletes. So again, this is really focused on empowering and challenging your followers in terms of thinking about what that vision we're actually going to have and how we can actually communicate that belief in our athletes so they can achieve higher level goals. As far as intellectual stimulation, this really is about involving your athletes in the coaching process. So providing opportunities for them to get involved, to think about problems in new ways, to adopt new perspectives, and really challenge that sort of critical thinking aspect of their development. And lastly, we have individualized consideration, which really involves a more person-centered approach in which you're showing genuine care and concern, not just for the athlete, but really the athlete as a person. So considering their development both in and out of sport. So these 4 I's really come from the organizational psych literature. And this is traditionally how transformational leadership has been measured. So people will use questionnaires to assess their leaders on these 4 I's. But we still had a few questions in terms of what do these 4 I's actually look like in sport? So that really was a focus of my doctorate, was trying to get a better sense of what does transformational coaching actually look like. So as I mentioned, the vast majority of studies really had been using questionnaires. So because of our background in using observation, we really had an interest in finding a new way of measuring and capturing these behaviors and really understanding what do they look like in a sport context. So to do this, we did a series of literature reviews. So trying to understand both how transformational leadership has been measured in other contexts, but also looking at the coaching literature and seeing how we've been measuring coaching behaviors and finding ways of bringing those bodies of literature together. We also did a lot of observations. So we used a library of videos that we had over the years and watched a lot of videos of coaches in various contexts. So both high performance, youth sport, male and female, individual and team sport, able-bodied and parasport context to really understand what are those behaviors that we're seeing so that we could actually map those back to the literature and understand how these behaviors that we're seeing in real time link to these ideas of transformational leadership. And also that we did interviews. So trying to better understand how and why transformational coaching behaviors are used. So we did interviews with coaches, both to understand, behaviors that they actually use that align with these ideas. But also we had a series of studies where we actually had clips of coaches using different types of leadership behaviors and talk them through to better understand their decision-making and their thought process behind why they use these behaviors and the outcomes they're actually trying to achieve. So all this led, sorry, in the next slide, to we really focused on developing a coding system, so an observational instrument that would let us actually measure these behaviors in real time. And this is where these 11 behaviors of what we'll call transformational coaching really came from. So it came from that series of studies to understand what those 4 I's, what does it mean in sport? And this is how we conceptualize transformational coaching. So if we're mapping it back to them, again, you can see how these behaviors align with the idea of the 4 I's. Some interesting behaviors that emerged from this. One I think that was always I found interesting was the idea of showing vulnerability and humility and how that relates to gaining trust and respect from your athletes. So that can be, admitting gaps in knowledge or sharing your experiences with your athletes. We also saw a lot of really great behaviors in terms of how to provide meaning and challenge to your athletes' tasks and roles, giving opportunities for athletes to have input and decision-making and leadership. And it was really that person-centered approach about actually showing interest in your athletes and recognizing their contributions. So this really is how we conceptualized these behaviors, and that we were actually able to use this tool to measure behaviors in real time. And so this is really just, again, highlighting that the broader observation instrument, because while we were really interested in transformational coaching, we also recognize that coaches aren't transformational 100% of the time. So in our observational instrument, we also develop categories to help us capture the other aspects of the full range leadership model. So again, this is really providing a more holistic picture of what leadership behaviors look like in real time. Because again, we found that most coaches tend to have a balance between these different behaviors. So a lot of coaches will have a profile that includes a mix of transformational, transactional, and neutral behaviors. But we also see coaches who also exhibit the full range and might have transformational and toxic behaviors. So understanding how coaches actually balance these behaviors and when they use them and which athletes they use them with is a really important question that we're trying to answer. So and the next slide, the other piece that we recognized was that coaches are not 100% transformational, but we also found some gaps. So when we were observing coaches, we had a study of ice hockey coaches, and we recognized that there was some gaps in their behavior where they were displaying a lot of neutral behaviors, and that we had an opportunity to both improve the quantity and quality of coaches' leadership behaviors. So we were left with the question of how do we go about doing that? So over the past few years, that's what we've been working on as well, is figuring out how we can actually teach coaches and improve the quality of their leadership behaviors. So we've been developing a workshop that actually is focused on helping coaches understand these behaviors and how they, again, improve the quantity and quality of their leadership behaviors in their interactions with their athletes.